to Psychedelics Today. This is Joe Moore coming at you from Breckenridge, Colorado. Today on the show, we have the most people I've ever had in a single podcast. This is with a lot of the organizers from Washington State doing really interesting work. A bunch of different approaches here, and just really love all of the energy and focus and diversity here in this group. So I think we call them the Entheo Society of Washington. And just really impressed with all these folks. And I really, really hope to be able to work with them all in the future. So just a heads up that our Navigating Psychedelics course has sold out for March, but we have dates open in May. Kicks off on May 20. We have 2 editions, and I hope you like it. So we've got what is it here? It's 2 p.m. Eastern and then 7 p.m. Eastern. And people from Australia are able to make those times work. We got a lot of folks in Europe and this kind of this current 2 cohorts. And it's been great. 45-day money-back guarantee. And I think you'll dig it. So you could jump in now, take a bunch of the education, and be even more prepared for the class than if you just jumped in right at the time we start. So think about it. If you're interested in CEs, we've got those. You can read about them on our site over at psychedelicEducationCenter.com. So I think that's it for now. Yeah, enjoy the show, and we'll see you on the other side. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. We have a really exciting episode for you here. This is the most people I've ever had on a single episode, and I'm really excited about it. We spent a little bit of time with some technical stuff, but now we are ready to dig in. So we've got a lot of folks here from Entheo Society. Leo, what can you tell us about Entheo Society? It's a Washington-based decrim movement.
Sure. So for us, it started off as a decrim effort, and then we kind of split into 2 sister agencies that are basically kind of the same thing at this point in a lot of ways. But we run together. The groups collaborate and contain a lot of the same people. And I came onto it about a year ago, and it had been growing like on a community basis here in local living rooms, like with people meeting and so forth. But I would say about in January, it really started to take off this year. And the women that are involved in this call are women that come from the community and have collaborated with Entheo and are involved with Entheo, but are also involved in other communities locally and so forth. And so I think it's a good conglomerate that we have here today. And I just wanted to introduce everyone. There's Malika Lamont, Tatiana, Solana Booth, and Monique Bridges. Those are the people on the call.
Great. So I'm really excited. Leo, one group is focused on decriminalization, and I'm sorry, what is the other group focused on?
Yep. So yeah, Decrim Seattle is focused just on we're going to meet today actually it'll be our second meeting with City Council. So this is our second meeting since April of asking them to decriminalize entheogens, primarily ayahuasca, psilocybin, and iboga. So at this point, we're going to have another meeting today with City Council and see where that goes. But that's an ongoing grassroots effort to request that, on the grassroots level, we're going to achieve this. We're going to achieve decriminalization. So that'll be the first step. Entheo is the long-term vision, is the community center, is the treatment center, is the open access and above board ceremony, the community building, the movie we want to do about the Pacific Northwest, and really looking at the underground psychedelic culture from a perspective of, who hasn't been covered in the past. We've had a lot of white men in this movement. And for me, I consider the first wave of the psychedelic movement to be very masculine oriented. And so for me, just my personal opinion, the second wave just feels much more diverse. And I see a lot more women leading. And I'm excited about these women. I have lots of curiosity about them. I recently said to Solana, who's on our team, would she go down to Northern California and meet this woman who's in recovery, who's doing ibogaine with folks. And I'm just really curious about the women in the movement, how they've come up and how they found their voice. And just, we've never seen women before lead in grassroots psychedelic efforts, political efforts. We've never seen that in human history. So I just want to celebrate these women, right? It's just, I want to help the ones that, are behind on the mountain and lift them up.
Yeah, that's great. And, boring question, I'm sorry to have to say it, but first wave versus second wave, how do you define those? Do you put dates on those or anything like that?
Oh, when I think about the political movements of the 60s and 70s and how they were influenced by psychedelics and mind consciousness shifting, I mean, you see a lot of cultural, like when you throw a stone into the water, you see the ripples, you see the effects. And so I think we saw a lot of political change and emotional change in the fabric of this country as a result of the 60s and 70s.
Cool. So like first wave kind of being that American cultural revolution that we call the 60s,
Well,
right?
but largely motivated by men in positions of power, men who had access to education or who had access to funding to travel.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. And yeah, now we're seeing, for a lot of reasons, there's a lot of people coming to the party, and it's really great. My did a lot of study on permaculture, and the phrase that I love is like diversity equals intelligence and resilience. And we need both of those a lot right now. So I'm really just happy there's so many different types of folks coming to the table.
Well, and also when we look at leadership, I think it's really interesting to look at different ways of leadership. And as far as the women and how women might choose to lead differently, I see a lot more sharing of power.
Good. That's excellent. That's excellent. And yeah, and this has been a really massive talk track. I don't really know when it got started, but this masculine mode of operating the planet isn't really working out for us very well right now. And so I'll reveal my bias, and you can beat me up if you want to, but like I kind of blame Rene Descartes and Isaac Newton for a lot of this, separating us in a lot of ways from who we are and what we are. And we've got a big problem we've got to work our way out of. And it's not even one problem, right? It's myriad problems.
No, and it's interesting for me because I have a lot of friends that are in the environmental movement locally. And when they emphasize the importance of focusing on the environmental movement instead of psychedelic liberation, I talk to them about, well, if we can break people's minds open, maybe it will mean less war and less poverty and less sadness and less disease and less mental health and less chemical dependency. So if we want to stop raping the planet, let's stop raping ourselves and open our minds, in our consciousness.
Absolutely. I think it's important. I think some folks try to argue against that, but I think it's essential. We do have a little bit of data that suggests people who use psychedelics have a little bit more relatedness to nature and the planet. So I think that's, at least we have one Western data point on that. I don't know that we have a ton that would be acceptable, but I think that's enough for me.
So one thing that I'm really trying to focus on in this movement is bringing different people to the table that bring different gifts and different connections. Monique is part of the local Ayahuasca Church, and that is a group that I'm trying to partner with right now in terms of the leader of the Santo Daime, and trying to work with him to look on a long-term vision of working with street addicts. And that would mean that the Santo Daime would be coming out of the closet, which historically they haven't done in this country in terms of doing like street ministry. So I just really love partnering with different people.
Yeah, that's really great. That's a really exciting move. Might this be the right time to bring in Monique to maybe chat about that?
Yeah, if she's, yeah.
So hi, Monique.
Hi.
So thanks for being here. I'm really excited to have you. Yeah, like this is a really interesting question. Like, your church has, been pretty quiet, and there hasn't really been much outreach. And, that's a big shift for an organization to say, oh, let's bring in more people. Yeah. What would you like to chat about related to your church?
Yeah, well, that hasn't been determined yet. And the reason I think it's something that Leo is it's in conversation.
Okay.
However, just to speak to why that is because we don't proselytize. We don't go out and get people to come. That's not our way. It's more so, it's like people find their way to this type of work. And just how I came to know the Daime is I was in search of something within my own self. I felt like there was something that was just outside my reach, and outside my consciousness that I couldn't quite reach. And all this information was coming, I was receiving about ayahuasca and plant medicine, and I never done psychedelics before. I'm from Columbus, Ohio, originally, And I'm an African American woman that, my family, we lived in the suburbs. I've never had like a understanding of these things until later in my life. And I start really doing work of my own discovery about intuition and spirit and following my heart. And ultimately, it led me to the Daime, this just my inquiry of life and through being in nature, actually. So and then there's many stories people have like finding their way to the Daime. So the door is there. The door is open. It's just that we don't go out and tell people come join or anything like this. This is a quest of one spirit, and one receives a calling for it. So for me, why I joined or offer my support to Decrim is that I see that there's a lot of people that don't have access or a knowledge of this plant, this medicine. And there's a lot of people that are suffering, and the ways that they've been indoctrinated into our current health system, it doesn't work for them. They may find or whatever. So I just wanted to get the stigmatism from it being a drug, like it's illegal and it's criminalized. I would want to work and be a part of an organization to help change that. And so people of all kinds can have access to this medicine if they feel so called. So that's why I'm here. I'm here on that. That's my personal mission. So I don't know if I answered your question in regards to.
I think so. Can you tell me a little bit more about your role in the organization?
My role, I'm the head of the female battalion. That's kind of like I'm considered a fiscal, or in Brazil it's called fiscal. In English we use the word guardian. So when I hold the container and assist people through passages that they may, or their healing. I hold space for people's healing. And with the Santo Daime, it's a collective shamanism. Generally, there's like in some circles, there's one shaman that sings and sings the healing songs of their tribe. And but here in the Daime, everyone does that work of holding that space of singing. So my job is to also be of service in doing that work as well. Yeah, and holding the intention and prayer to the best of my ability.
Right.
Yeah, I just try to safe place, a safe place, a place that holding unconditional love for people's processes.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
So you are kind of like a female leader. Is that in the organization?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I never really considered myself that, because I feel that I feel like it's a circle instead of one heading out. So me using that word is very interesting, because I do it with my brothers and my sisters, the people.
That's great.
We work together. So, but yeah, I'm their head guardian.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Cool. How many people do you think are affiliated with your group?
With my beautiful point here in the Pacific Northwest, there is about, I'd say about 20 of us. About
Great.
10, 15 like this, because they're traveling and we're moving. But just in this particular pocket, there's just the one that in my point, there's about 5 or 10 of us are there. Yeah.
So Monique, you're actually the first person we've had on to talk about the Daime.
Oh, really? I really feel like I'm not really I don't feel like I'm qualified. I'm to really speak about the organization. I'm just coming as, just sharing my experience, but I can't speak on the behalf of
So generally speaking, because you've received so much from the organization and the fellowship, that you're really committed to working towards decriminalization on psychedelic plants or entheogens or ayahuasca specifically, or how do you like to talk about that?
Well, I would like to talk about it from just as myself, as a mother. I have 4 sons, and
Oh boy.
yeah, and they kind of know what my practice is, but they're finding their own way, and I see a lot of their friends are struggling. I've seen a lot of them deal with depression and their traumas and drug addiction. And I just see that there's just a need for some sort of education or ways where one can experience psychedelics in a safe way. I just feel, if we can decrim these medicines, and so we can have a way to utilize them in a way that it's more conscious and take the shame and the stigma from it, and because it's not a crime. I think plants and nature is a crime. It's
quite silly to have plants, and it's I've been on the whole taking up essentially arms against in the drug war on this other side of it, and it's quite amazing. There's no data that went into these laws. It was all political.
Yeah.
And it's not okay, because we're people who have a stake in the country, and the laws should be there to help serve everybody, not just to be a jerk to the citizens.
Yeah. So I'm just at that capacity, of just using my voice as a citizen and teaming up with like-minded people. And I could just see as a positive benefit to our society.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Monique, before we jump to somebody else, would you like to say any more about your interest in this or your work?
I'm just very grateful to have had the ability to do this work with plant medicine, and it's my way, and that it's not a crime, that I can go and not feel like my livelihood is jeopardized, and I can be in fellowship and receive my healing and do my work, loving myself and others. And I'm glad that I could be creating that opportunity for others, for that being a possibility for others.
Well, thanks for doing this, Monique, and I'm glad you're part of the movement.
Oh, man, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. I think top to bottom is good here. Malika, would you be able to jump in and talk about your interest in the world of psychedelics, entheogens, decriminalization, and whatnot?
Sure. Thank you for this opportunity.
Absolutely.
So my background is in harm reduction. We work towards meeting people where they are and very much holding space for people and having unconditional positive regard with individuals that use drugs, people that have been impacted by the drug war. And our movement is also about dismantling systems of oppression and building power with marginalized people. And as the director of Vocal Washington, which stands for Voices of Community Activists and Leaders Washington, our direct work is to build political power with marginalized people. I'm working on a policy framework called Care First, which is about meeting people that experience extreme marginalization and problematic substance use, that they should be able to engage in care and not be criminalized. As people have mentioned, or around the edges, the drug war was designed to oppress Black and Brown people. The thing that attracts me about the way that this particular group of Decriminalize Nature and the women that are in this interview approached the work is that they want to address systemic issues that are harming people. My approach tends to be more agnostic towards all substances, not just limited to psychedelics. However, what is extremely attractive about decriminalization of psychedelics is that we know that the most potential is there to be able to help people heal from the issues that have impacted them through systemic violence. However, we can't stop there, because just to heal somebody, to throw them back into a harmful system is not enough. We need to dismantle the systems. And part of that work would be to decriminalize plant medicine and to have a safe supply and to create legal access for people so that, and my interest overall is to be able to increase access for the most marginalized people so that we can start addressing generational trauma and problematic substance use that often occurs as a result of that.
Mm. Well, I'm a big fan of everything you just said, and I like how you phrased it too. I just found out today that there's an organization in Denver, the first ever group to get approval to do Medicaid, ketamine assisted psychotherapy. And I think that's a really big move. So, there are other groups working on it as well. And I just can't wait till people have more access and things are continued to be affordable. And yeah. and we stop paying taxes to do harm to our fellow humans in our country. So, abolish the DEA is one of my new fun things to say, but we'll see if that gets me locked up. Malika, thank you for that. And your organization, you said Vocal
Washington. Mm-hmm.
Right. That's great. Is there a website you want to point people towards?
They can find our most up-to-date information on the Public Defender Association's website, defender.org. We are a project underneath their umbrella of, I think of our entire organization as a think tank for criminal legal system reform. We also, of course, touch all of the other systems, the behavioral health systems, the medical systems that have racism and oppression embedded in them as well as our criminal legal system. So we have a cohort of programming under the umbrella of the Public Defender Association to work to try and change those systems.
Great. It sounds like you've read The New Jim Crow. Is that a fair guess?
My family's lived The New Jim Crow. So no, I have not actually read that book. But
incredibly data rich.
Mm-hmm.
If you're building arguments and have to convince like politicians, like that might be a good source. But it sounds like you're already doing incredible work.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. So you had personal stories in your past that convinced you it was a good idea to start working on this stuff?
Well, I mean, generational trauma has been something that has impacted both sides of my family, but definitely Black and Indigenous side of my family. And I have harm reduction, when I finally got a name for what I had been advocating for pretty much my whole life, I realized that there was a community of people that recognizes the humanity of all people, and especially people that use drugs, and that we work together to balance power, to take power back from systems that are designed to destroy us, and to create healing and to hold space and to have that unconditional positive regard. And also, like I said, to build power amongst marginalized people so that hopefully we can have a future that isn't as harmful as the past and the present that we're experiencing. So yes, my family, I have tried to intervene. I was subject to a degree bit more privilege than some other people in my family. So trying to help be supportive to children in my family that, their parents were impacted. And so making sure that they could have a safe place. I also, for many years, worked coordinating a syringe exchange program at Southwest Washington.
Right.
And doing direct service and working with people and watching them struggle and watching the treatment systems that we have in place be completely inadequate for people and to be so stigmatizing and so traumatizing and so harmful. And psychedelics, from all of the research that and from watching people engage in their use and watching the most stable that some of my most chaotic, participants ever were, was when they had, safe and meaningful access to psilocybin. Hearing about individuals that were able to engage in ibogaine treatment, which is so hard to get access to, but years later, hearing from somebody that that was what turned their life around. Like, that is what made them be able to engage in healthier decisions for themselves, right? Because it's about self-determination. It's not about telling people what to do. It's about creating that power so that a person, for them, giving them the foundation so that they can do that for themselves, right? To engage in life in the way that they want to, in a way that works for them. And also that, we don't, because of the drug war, we don't even have meaningful access to the research around these treatment modalities, such as ibogaine, that, other countries have whole systems in place to be able to work with people, and also production models in place that don't marginalize indigenous people that use this for spiritual practice. But we don't even talk about that in the United States because the drug war, and then we penalize these other countries, and on the basis of the tentacles of our drug war that we've put into international law. So there's a lot to dismantle, but I think that being a part of this group and working with this group of women has been really poignant for me. Any of the change-making work that I've ever done has always been in the presence of women. And it's really nice to be able to find this group of people and be able to support each other and to, make these changes in our society, because I believe that we will be the ones that will be able to do it. As Leo said earlier, I think that, white supremacy, capitalism, sexism, racism, those were all very present in the first wave. And at least this little pocket of folks, we're trying to dismantle those things. We're seeing the whole picture and we're trying to address it.
That's fantastic. And thank you for all your work. It's incredible. Definitely want to stay in the loop on what you're up to. Yeah, thank you very much for everything you're doing. Anything else you want to throw up before we jump to Tatiana?
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being here. So, Tatiana, let's bring you in. Can you give us a little bit of an idea of the work you're doing and perhaps your orientation in the field?
Yeah, absolutely. So the work that I'm doing is, like Leo, more involved with the day-to-day operations of Entheo Society of Washington. Let's see, I'm thinking about where I should start. I think I want to start with my own background with encountering psychedelics. It started for me about 2 years ago. Just had an opportunity. A friend of mine offered me something, and I was mindful of like wanting to explore psychedelics, but I never really had access prior to 2 years ago when my friend basically gave me some psilocybin and said, "Here you go, have a good time," And at the moment, I really didn't know what the possibilities were for me. I knew I was feeling stuck. I was going through a lot of life transitions and struggling with depression and anxiety at that moment. And after that first experience, I just felt like my entire emotional landscape was reinvigorated. There was a marked difference between the way I experienced myself before that experience and the way I've been experiencing myself over the past 2 years. So more recently, I had the opportunity and the time to start volunteering with Entheo Society. So I came in, and, the way that the group was being run was really different than a lot of other organizations that I've either worked with or have seen run, more top down kind of things. But here, the process was really familiar to me. So the work that I did previously before I moved to Seattle, which was also about 2 years ago, was in experiential education. And I've transitioned now into the tech world. That's why I came to Seattle. But when I came here, I saw that the leadership style was very much collaboration based. Everyone's opinion mattered, and it wasn't top down. So that was something that I really appreciated, because that's, in my point of view, even though making decisions can be really challenging when you have so many opinions in the room, that's how you get to a place where you're kind of seeing the holes, you're exploring all of the options, and sometimes even have opportunities to check your own biases in your opinions. So my role that I play with Entheo, I think, boils down to being sort of an integrator. I can see the big picture and break it down into tasks, like actionable tasks, and kind of put together a roadmap for like, okay, this is where we want to get to this goal. This is the steps that we're going to need to take for us to get there. So that's kind of in a nutshell what I do. I wear a lot of little different hats. Right now, I'm taking a break. I just have a lot going on, and I just need some time, to take some me time. But basically, when I get back into things, we're going to continue to engage and work with city council, engage and work with folks who are getting turned on to what it is that we stand for and what we're looking to achieve, whether that's through social media or, COVID has made things really complicated. Primarily, it'll be through social media or through like action meetings where folks can like be with us live and write, like we'll give them templates and write emails and whatnot. So that's sort of the different kind of roles that I'm playing with Entheo. And then personally, why I feel invested and why I continue to choose to stay invested in this movement is there's a lot of reasons, but I think primarily it's because I believe in the power that all of us bring to really creating the world that we want to see. And so one of the things that really stands out to me, like something that I really want to see, is I would like to see the economy of psychedelics be something that's more dispersed and less concentrated. I've been learning recently about how cannabis legalization in California and basically all of the fees that you need to pay, even before you set up your business, just to get licensed, and be above board, it amounts to about $500,000. I mean, it's so much money. And I can't imagine that the folks who are already, in the underground psychedelic movement, providing for folks, psilocybin and other plant-based medicines, I can't imagine that folks just have that kind of cash sitting around. So it's really important to me that we make safe access also be an affordable route as well. And I think that there's just so much personal healing and therapeutic benefits. The research is already showing, or I should say, reinforcing all of that. So the other thing that I wanted to add is that there's not a whole lot of folks growing up that were around me that knew about, talked about, had experience with psychedelics. I'm a Puerto Rican woman. So in my family, like drugs are bad, essentially. Like that kind of narrative is absolutely one that was one that I grew up with and one that has harmed a lot of people in my family as well. And I want to be an advocate and I want to be a resource to other folks and in my community and people that I know. So I kind of see us as all of us as like little nodes in a network. And the more diverse that we are, the more impact we can have across the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, organization's super important to help build, power and influence in this kind of crazy, sick world that we've inherited. And yeah, it's amazing. I'm just really happy to hear you're doing that work and you're involved and bringing your own heritage to it. Because, the more backgrounds we have and the more superpowers we have at the table, the further we get, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you noticed a big shift in attitudes in the last few years in your area, Tatiana? Like around psychedelics and plant medicines?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. What does that look like?
I have, and I was going to say, I think primarily I'm seeing that through social media. I'm seeing folks, like, for example, just different kinds of people coming into the foray. People of color, like Black women in New York City or in Maryland, or Native American folks right here in the Pacific Northwest, starting to educate themselves and others about the potential that we have to work with plant-based medicine. And also, I do believe that there's also a shift in general towards not criminalizing people for any kind of substance use. I think that is a very real, attainable goal. It's coming, and I really believe that. But yeah, I would say primarily I'm seeing that shift on social media. And then personally, when I do choose to disclose, that this is something that's part of my life, I haven't encountered anyone who's been all that shocked, like when you think about the reputation that these medicines have, most folks are pretty like intrigued and interested in knowing more and not so much like shocked. So I do think that we've kind of moved away from the attitudes that came after the drug war was started in the 70s.
Yeah. And I think you're spot on. That's huge. Less baggage somehow than there was 20 years ago or 10 years ago.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been involved since about 2001. And yeah, I think there's just something about like even bad media being helpful. Like people get curious. You're like, oh, there's something interesting here. Like I'm sure at least a couple of you watched the Gwyneth Paltrow piece on there's mushroom use in Jamaica.
Oop.
Yeah. Didn't appreciate the piece a ton, but I knew it was going to change a lot of hearts and minds and be helpful for the movement overall. Even imperfect attempts can be super helpful.
Yeah, I think the more attention it can get, the better, because people, I think, will find their way to learning about it. I think the propaganda, we've moved past the propaganda phase, and now it's just the crowdsource. Like, here's our knowledge, here's ancestral knowledge. All of that is still very much present, and I think it's important not to discredit that. That's another thing that I was going to mention, was that to me it's important not to discredit the ancestral knowledge of many of these plant-based medicines. Like, these have been around for generations, thousands of years, and have been used by people for so long. And it's important to find a balance between being able to utilize these in a medical way, but also to know that these have been used safely for so long in people, and to like go and find out and discover that knowledge for yourself. There's a lot of resources online, obviously, but I think it's really much more powerful when someone can tell you their story. It's way more powerful than just reading something on a blog post.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's definitely a shame that we minimize the really old traditions. And there's a lot of wisdom there. There's a lot of things that can help people there. Just a really, really kind of cheap story that was impressive to me when I heard it. A good friend of mine actually went to Peru for a few months and was able to find healing from his psoriasis, the kind of autoimmune skin disorder. And that was through traditional healers, plant medicines in the Amazon. And nothing that Western scientists could handle ever. He was 45 at the time. So, that example alone should indicate that there's so much more left there in terms of wisdom that can help, the whole world from all these disorders. And there's probably a lot more too, like that we're not even talking like shamanism yet, like actual interactions with spirits and energies and whatnot. That's a big thing that I don't know therapists are going to be able to learn, or can even the West conceptualize it very well yet.
Yeah, we just have such a different way of looking at the world, and I think there's so much that can be learned by collaborating and not just extracting, right? Like, we have a model of extracting resources from other places. I think it's time and that's why we're here, right? Like, that's why we have so many different voices here, even at our table, because there's so much that we can learn from one another, and there's so much that we can learn from the indigenous healers that are doing the work and have been doing the work for generations, not just taking something out of context and then applying it any which way, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Tatiana, anything else you want to add on before we jump down to Monique?
Oh, just thank you so much for this opportunity. Yeah.
No worries. We already talked to Monique. Sorry. Happy to have you, and happy that you're playing a part here.
Thank you.
I hope you get the rest you need so that you can come back and hit the streets harder. Yeah. Solana, are you able to jump in and share a little bit about your story and your work?
Yeah. So my 3 Indian names are Solana, Ishtainawaji, and Lachlan Blue. And I just wanted to share a little bit of my language prior to what I needed to say today. Some Ayakadak, some Tlani Lali Mina Utsu, Awamian Demguk Wal Nawan. I was just saying that I talked about my 3 Indian names. I was saying that the universe is singing to my soul from the heart of the prairie to the heart of the ocean. And these are ancestral tellings, these are ancestral truths, what I was called to share today with you. So, in Radical Humility and Prayers, Executive Director of Advocates of Sacred and Principal Consultant, mother, grandmother, daughter, sister, secret society or smokehouse lead doctor, traditional medicine woman for my family and my community. So, also being in allegiance with Washington Entheo Society and Decrim Seattle, as well as an ally and advisor to Decriminalize Nature National. My direct family lineage is of the plant teachers, the plant medicines, and the relationship to Mother Earth. So, being a direct descendant from the one who sang the plants and delivered them from Mother Earth, she established the protocol for the plants. And because of our ancient disciplines and protocol, which I've been able to employ through a lot of discernment, a lot of trauma, a lot of family experience, and learning and practicing the ancient ways, being able to, like in the highest regard, only to share these teachings and remindings from generational trauma recovery, hopefully, and praying and working and advocating for spiritual justice, emotional justice, for women to heal our eighth direction, our womb, our highest selves, and access, like truly access from anywhere you stand, from anywhere you sit, that interpersonal and interspiritual connection in relationship to Mother Earth, to her breath, which is what I've been able to reclaim as the plant teachers, the plant medicines, the entheogen parts of mushrooms, and recreate our relationship to ourselves, our sisters, each other, and our families. My main objective with this call today, Joe, is to advocate for our human family, the Black and Indigenous peoples, to resource themselves in truth. Inclusivity and diversity and love is the biggest aspect of what I love speaking to, reminding us of our birthrights, to heal our birthrights, to reconcile those relationships with ourselves and Mother Earth, specifically Mother's breath and the entheogens. Our privilege is to connect to our highest selves and one another and remind us that only the truth can keep us warm. I know truth is a loaded word. And when I speak to relationships, I could almost feel people's ankles getting tight in tension, or like the tension in the back of your neck. Like, how is your relationship to your highest self, or how true are you being with your spirit, or how is your emotional justice? How is your spiritual justice? And I just really want to remind folks that truth, and that the evidence of that truth is always outside, that Mother Earth is so good in her abundance and how she shows up for us, that all the examples of true collaboration, of true diversity and true inclusivity is outside. You go outside and you see that the dead leaves are not fighting to hang on to the tree in the fall, that's the moment when the salmon come back home, because to them it sounds like drums, to the salmon who are wanting to spawn once they hear the leaves falling, and then to the flowers that have to fall off the plant for the fruit to come. Or there's so many beautiful, amazing examples of how we can be with ourselves and how we can be with each other, and understanding that relationship that Mother Earth shows us in those protocols. And when you get to the beginning of the forest, of like where it gets thick, there's the vanguards. There's the ones who are fire resistant. There's the trees that are so flexible through the storms and through the winds. And so then there's only like the higher elevation plants, the ones that are like can help us with our respiratory or heart issues. And then how the mushrooms are born out of waste. Like typically mushrooms are really, they come up after fires have happened, or like I call them the somatic spoilage, like the true reconciliation. Mushrooms have always been that example for me outside. Their reconciliation in its highest form, in its physical form. And so it's opportunities like this that we can, really educate and remind each other through these invitations, through this call to action of connecting to the truth. So when I talk about reconciliation and reclaiming mother's breath, which is the plant teachers, the plant medicine that has brought healing and recovery through ceremony that I've been able to practice with local indigenous folks, local non-native people as well, going into her breath, going into the medicine, the mushrooms in particular. These ceremonies and recalling mother's breath and truly seeing her vulnerability and giving her that visibility, I've witnessed people beginning to extinguish their own falsehoods, beginning to face their own sexual traumas, beginning to dismantle racism or sexism or their own shadow or somatic spoilage stuff. I've seen folks recover or begin recovering from intimate partner violence, substance use disorder, childhood sexual abuse and assault or neglect, incarceration, like the reentry, how it's just such a big transition for folks who have been incarcerated. Also doing work with pregnant people and trying to help them not birth in fear and then minimize birthing outcomes, diabetes, obesity, not being able to breastfeed. So through partnering and really reclaiming mother's breath, these plant teachers, these plant medicines, and accepting her abundance is being able to seek our highest selves, being able to allow that truth or a smidgen of that seed of truth to be transplanted into us to help folks reclaim their voice, promoting our choices and re-empowering ourselves in all diversity and inclusivity. And I just wanted to, if I can say this, I wanted to ask if folks can pray for me, or if you don't pray, then just think it, to get my own Recover Me and Wellness Center so we can have plant ceremonies, so I can help folks through these indigenous and domestic healing modalities and, traditional ceremonies. I belong to a few different ancient Native American, indigenous, First Nations ceremonies that help folks pray, that help folks recover themselves. And being experienced and educated in plant medicines and plant teachers, and truly being a storyteller of these creation stories that brought and show us evidence today in 2020 of how these plant teachers have been working since the Great Flood, how these plant teachers and plant medicines have been calling us or speaking to us, or how much we've been listening since the sun came into the world. There's so many amazing, amazing knowings that can come from these stories, the sharing of these creation stories, and being able to resonate in yourself some of the truth. And just how, I just can't stress enough that being a woman of color, being a sister of color, that there's so, it's even a little bit trickier sometimes to speak up in a room full of white men or even other folks of color who are they kind of have that crabs in the bucket mentality. I know that so far through my advocacy of plant medicines, particularly entheogens in Washington and around the tribes and the tribal folks, I haven't gotten a lot of pushback, but sometimes I'll get like an eye roll or a stare off into the side, like good for you. Yeah, that's not me. I don't do drugs. And then there's folks that are like, oh, tell me more. It's a big deal for me because I really want to focus on the extinguishment of objectifying Mother Earth. I really don't like it when people say use psychedelics when they're talking about mushrooms or talking about plant medicines, because we don't use people. Like, I'm not going to use my sister Leo when I'm in a conversation with her. I'm going to partner with her and listen and look at her face if I can see her and be with her in that moment. And so I'm not going to use any plants. I'm going to go into the medicine. I'm going to ask permission. Clearly, there's already a relationship there. And so I just really want to promote and disallow and extinguish any objectification of Mother Earth. And so that's why I've been focusing on reclaiming these plant medicines and plant teachers as mother's breath. Because when we look at these beautiful plants, whether it's a mushroom or a wildflower or dandelions who are super wild, I feel like they're just asking for visibility, and they're so vulnerable, but they're so strong, they're so powerful, they're so amazing and resourceful that there's so much medicine in all these plants, and they're not just the ones with psilocybin. Many plants I have so much medicine in them that it's powerful, and I really want to begin to extinguish those terms and focus on how can we provide visibility, how can we acknowledge mothers' vulnerabilities in those moments. And perhaps I feel like it's difficult for folks because maybe they don't see themselves, maybe they don't want to acknowledge their own vulnerabilities or ask for their own visibility, or even acknowledge and accept that that's important to them. So I just really want to call folks to action and invite them to hear me out, invite them to know that everything we are doing, how we're wanting to reconnect and partner with Mother's breath, which is building on our strengths, including generational evidence of sound and practical, sustainable efforts moving forward for our grandchildren's grandchildren. And being a grandmother, it's like my grandchildren's grandchildren are already here because I have 2 granddaughters. So there's already all these generations like in my face constantly. And so I'm just really inviting everyone to align with us in any way you see fit to progress this healing movement, this truthful movement, this mother's breath acknowledgement, and just whatever is going to keep you warm, whatever parts of these truths you want to hold on to, you're invited to hold on to that, because that's what you can build on.
Solana, that was all amazing.
Thank you.
Really happy to know you're out there doing this. And I love the name Mother's Breath.
Oh,
It brings to mind so many amazing visions and sensations just thinking about that.
thank you, Joe.
Yeah. I'm curious. I took this note at the beginning, but about this idea of emotional and spiritual justice. Can you explain what that is? I don't think I've been exposed to that before.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for asking. That's a great question. Lately, I've been training different county executive leadership and different folks like that throughout a few regions of Washington state. And because of the civil unrest, people are really wanting social justice, and everything's about social justice. And I'm like, okay, that's a cop out. I see that as a cop out, and I see it as not acknowledging or being all inclusive or even diverse within folks' self, within themselves. And so I've really been pushing and advocating for people to begin to accept a need for emotional and spiritual justice. So being human beings, Joe, we're made of water. We're mostly water, just like Mother Earth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have all the same elements as Mother Earth. Well, the water part in us is also the emotional part of us. So we're emotional beings, and we disallow emotions to arise. We disallow processing of emotions, and we just disallow the entirety of anything emotional as if we're afraid. And so as if fear is not an emotion. Mm-hmm. And so folks are saying that they're not emotional people, but they're living in fear. And so they're really good at suppressing all the other emotions. And so I feel like because of the compounded trauma effects, the pandemic, I feel like folks have been silencing themselves, that marginalizing themselves because of generational trauma, because of historical trauma, because of societal unspoken roles. I mean, the system that folks are living in is broken, and we just kind of have accepted that. And we're not even asking for emotional justice or spiritual justice. We know in our hearts that we're not serving our highest selves, and that we're discontented or we're being complacent throughout most of the days, throughout most of our working days. It's like we've grown to be okay with the abuse of Mother Earth, with the abuse of women, with the abuse of pregnant people or infants and babies, or like everything's just kind of okay, but then it's not, because then you go online and you look at what folks are concerned with, but they're not accepting that within themselves either. So it's like folks are really good at jumping on a bandwagon and following the crowd when it comes to marching for social justice, knowing in their hearts and knowing in their minds and knowing that their ancestors are craving spiritual justice. They're craving emotional justice. They want those freedoms too, because we're entire people. We're not just social people. We're not just part of the crowd. We're actually, each one of us can be healers within our own rights. Each one of us can have our own creation story that can change someone's life. And that's because we all have a belly button. We were all born. We are all here sharing breath today. All of us have that in common. So all of us have that birthright to create. And we're not doing any creating if we're not even asking for acceptance or freedoms or justice for all of our parts.
Beautiful. Thank you, Solana. I think you will get that healing center.
Thank you, Joe. I hope.
Just hearing you speak, I think you're in. And Malika, you raised your hand there. Would you like to jump in?
Yes, I just wanted to, I feel like that we need to have a little bit of, that was beautiful, Solana. And also I think that there's some qualifying that maybe, because what struck me is that, social justice is a cop-out. I think that, there's so many reasons why people aren't able to seek emotional justice for themselves. And it's like privilege is real. And, in our society and in this country, how you look, definitely like your phenotype, that contributes greatly to how you're received in the world. And I can say, as a visibly brown person, that, my emotions don't matter to a number of people. And I know that that is the case for many people of color. Our humanity is not even recognized. So to seek or even contemplate emotional justice is so far removed from the reality that many people experience. And to be able to gain emotional, to even take the time away from survival to be able to contemplate these things is real. Like, it's the inability to be able to take that time. So, with all of the talk of being gentle and reaching higher consciousness and being cognizant of the healing properties of these plants, I think that we also cannot lose focus that trauma out of context can look like culture. Trauma out of context can look like personality or be perceived as weakness. And that if we're going to be responsive to addressing trauma and creating true safety for people, then we can get to this higher realization. But I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't if I didn't respond in that way. I felt a little triggered by that. So, for what it's worth.
Well, thank you for mentioning that. Leo, can we have you comment?
Well, can you hear me okay?
Yes. There's a little bit of an echo.
What I was going to say is that I feel like that's a complex perspective in terms of how that gets unpacked. And we may not have time for that today, but I think it speaks to the comfort level of our group that we can disagree and have conflict be a process that actually helps us and becomes cathartic. So I think it's a strength in our group that we're able to have conflict with one another. I find a lot of people in the Pacific Northwest to be very conflict avoidant. But I was also going to mention that Malika said to me in the beginning when I first got to know her, she said, it's one thing to throw open the psychedelic door and say, hey, people of color, or hey, people who've been left out of these movements, you're welcome to come in. We've got a seat for you. And she was talking about how when folks of color or people who've been disenfranchised come into these grassroots groups that are led by white people, how it's easy to tokenize them, or it's easy to recreate the trauma of the culture and aspects of colonization, and how that can be a re-traumatization for people of color. So on a different subject, I just wanted to mention before we ended today that I continue to learn from all of these amazing women, and have shed tears many times during this interview, because these women are so amazing, and I just find them beautiful, and I love their different perspectives, and I love that we can disagree. Thank you.
Thank you. This is really great. And Solana, your hand is up there too.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. And thank you, Malika, for sharing your response to what I was speaking to regarding asking for emotional justice and demanding spiritual justice. I'm honored that you shared that, and I could really feel that you were emotionally triggered. I love what Leo said about conflicts are great, and I'm a firm believer in without conflicts, there's nothing to build on, because without conflicts, there's no opportunity for reconciliation or reparation or redemption of growing through something together. And that's my biggest goal and objective, is to grow through these conflicts with you, with my sisters, with women of color. Grandmothers of color in particular are who I've been working with down south here in Pierce County. And it's been amazing and beautiful. And there's conflicts, and it gets talked about. And I get it. I know that people don't care about our emotions. I know that. And I guess what I'm suggesting, and thanks for that again, what I'm suggesting to folks is that we can seek that out for ourselves. It's not, I guess it could have sounded like I was saying, let's go to the streets and ask for emotional justice. No, like within ourselves, we can seek that out. We can seek out our own spiritual justice for ourselves, so that maybe at that point there can be some re-empowering. There could be some other work to do if we're able to acknowledge at some point seeking recovery, I guess. So part of the indigenous modalities, the ancient ceremonies, all of those works that I've been doing, that I've trained, that I've spent blood, tears, and fought for, and been crazy disciplined to fulfill, is that throughout the recovery process from sexual assault, from sex trafficking, from substance use disorder, from broken families, from intimate partner violence, there's a ton of emotional unrest. There's a ton of spiritual unrest that's motivating and fueling behaviors that will only hurt us, that will only hurt our families, that will keep us incarcerated in these prisons, or keep us doing those things that will just hurt us. So thanks again for what you were saying, and I could really feel you. And I wish I can see your face right now, or offer a hug and just say thank you for what you said.
So just to be real clear, I wasn't necessarily saying that I'm in conflict with what I was trying to bring up, is that when we're speaking about these things with people that maybe don't, that's why I use the reference to context, like to people that may not have, this podcast is going to reach a broad group of people that may not have all of that context. And so I'm glad that you were able to, bring that up, but it wasn't necessarily from a place of conflict that I was responding. I was trying to address that without context, people might not understand what emotional justice means. And also, marginalized people, the burden of healing from systems designed to oppress us is oftentimes put on marginalized people. And I am totally a proponent of doing my work and encouraging others to do their own work. And like I said earlier, the whole reason why one of the whole reasons why I'm here is that we have to actively recognize that there are forces outside of us that are contributing as well. And for those that don't have that context or are not able to, or don't have lived experience, they may not recognize that. And then we find ourselves doubling down on this notion that marginalized and harmed people bear all of the responsibility to be able to address the harms that have systemically been perpetuated against them. That was the point that I was trying to make.
It's an important thing to raise, yeah. I think what I'm hearing is some folks are very much under-resourced and can barely eat or get through their day. Survival is so consuming that what room do you have to do self-care? I see that really regularly here where I live here and where all you live too. It's quite common. Solana, your hand's back up. Do you have a response there?
Sorry, I think my hand just stayed up the whole time. I didn't put it down or something. No, thanks again, Malika, for your response. And I really look forward to building and weaving these allegiances with one another and beginning to introduce practical solutions to people's pain. Like, I know that my family is, I know that we're all products of pain. I know that. And it's been a lot of work, like a ton of work. And that's why my goal is to partner and really love up my sisters like no other, so that we can build up ourselves and build up our families and just start there. I mean, we got to start somewhere. So thanks for this opportunity, Joe.
Absolutely. This is Leo. When we first chatted a few weeks back, I had no idea this was going to be this kind of amazing, broad-reaching conversation. And I'm just so happy that we were able to make it happen. And Leo, I'm kind of curious if you want to chime in about any kind of thoughts about everything we've covered so far or anything else you might want to add here.
Well, for me, it's all such a spiritual experience to meet these advocates and to meet these heroes, these heroines. So I just feel blessed and I feel humbled by knowing them and doing this work with them. It's very hard work. It's very emotionally exhausting work, and it's very spiritually exhausting work. And if I didn't have these kinds of roots to nurture me, to give me hope and to bolster me up, and also to keep me in fucking check, I don't know. I couldn't do it, you know? And when I first started out, it was like a bunch of white men pretty much that were leading the group. And I really had to fight my way, and it was hard. But now it's like these cats, and so it's much easier.
Yeah, that's amazing. And yeah, the movement has evolved so much. Like, we had very few female voices in this wave of the 60s. Like, I think generally thinking about it, maybe name 5. That's kind of telling. We've got a lot more now. And I'm really happy about that. And I'm also happy that we're getting a lot more diversity outside of gender diversity happening here. It's really great. Anybody else have any closing thoughts before we wrap up here?
Monique, anything?
Well, I think as this movement grows, we'll just create more opportunities for healing in many, many ways. I think that's kind of like the sum of it all for me anyways. And I just thank you for this opportunity, and thank you, Leo, and to all the ladies on the call. I've learned, and it just kind of like reinforces why I'm doing this work and being a part of this mission. Thank you. Would anybody else like to say anything?
Thank you all. This has been amazing. Just really happy to know you all a little bit more now. I'm just really happy you're all doing the work you're doing. I appreciate you spending time with me and educating our listeners. And I hope we get to connect more in the future. Until the next time, thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
And there you have it, Entheo Society. I hope y'all enjoyed that one. It was really fun for me. I learned a lot and got a lot of different perspectives. So I hope you follow up with them and possibly help. Yeah. A lot of organizing to do, a lot of work left before we sleep. So please, please, please get involved if you have the energy or effort. A lot of organizations you can help, from Drug Policy Alliance to Students for Sensible Drug Policy and beyond. So, yeah. So thank you to all the folks from Entheo Society that joined. Really appreciate you joining. And I hope we maybe get to do one-on-one interviews with each of you in the future. That was my initial hope, but I really like that Leo helped us kind of coordinate this and we got everybody on at once. That was fun and definitely lively for me and kept me on my toes. Yeah. So if you want to get involved, but maybe you want to stay inside for a little while longer and not get too active with groups, maybe you join us for Navigating Psychedelics for clinicians and therapists. And that starts up May 20. And I think it's going to be great for you if you join us. You can buy in the next couple of days, and you can study up like crazy before our live courses start up. It's about 47 hours of material in the whole program. Compare that pricing. It's definitely amazing. I think it's one of the better values in psychedelic education. And there are CEs available. So you can learn more about that on our page at psychedeliceducationcenter.com. And I read you I would read you a testimonial, but you can read them on the website at psychedeliceducationcenter.com. So I think that's it for now, everybody. And we will see you on the Friday episode. I hope you're having a great start to your week. And yeah, we'll see you on Solidarity Friday. This is Joe Moore signing off for Psychedelics Today from Park Ridge, Colorado. We'll see you then. Bye.